So we're going to talk just a little bit about what this actually looks like in practice. We're talking about a lot of ideas and ways of thinking about covenant, but want to point out from the outset that covenants are living documents. They're meant to not go into drawers, to be used, and to be practiced. They hold these values and loves and loyalties that we want to undergird this idea of doing what is right. And so it needs to be thought of as a living, breathing experience that we co-create in our community through practicing it. It guides our holy manners. It's guided by our holy manners that we agree to. So what is a covenant in practice? Okay, so it's going to be written down. There's a process that leads to it being written down, but that's your ultimate, what you're striving for is something that's in writing that has been agreed to by all its creators, owners, usually by continuing to work on it until everyone does agree to it. And then the understanding is that we're going to practice this when we come together, almost like it's a shared spiritual discipline that we agree to participate in as a way of being together and as a way of growing spiritually together. Covenant starts with naming the values, and so you're going to use we language, and it might go we affirm, we promise, we agree to, that kind of language. And it would be values-oriented, and then move on into naming the kinds of behaviors and actions that would be reflected by those values. There's a process to go through. We picked all of these words that begin with D. First of all, there's dialogue, then discernment, the development process, agreed to by the democratic process to endorse it, and then taking it out for practice and accountability, that deepening process of living into it. The dialogue, which is the beginning phase, it often is designed around questions like, first of all, why are we doing this? So pointing some to the history, some to our understanding about accountability. What are our deepest principles that we want to live out of in community together? And if we are agreeing to live out of our deepest principles, then how are they going to guide our actions in relation to each other? So that's a kind of beginning dialogue to begin talking about covenant. Then you're going to move next into a discernment phase, and that's when there starts to be more expression of how these values and actions are going to line up together. So, what's really important? What are the fundamentals that we are trying to get to? A covenant does not need to be 35, 45 points, single-spaced. What are the basics that are so important that we're going to be loyal to them and not leave them out? And what do we need to do to make sure that we are expressing these loyalties and values that we share? These are, in some ways, are ideals that we're striving for. We want to cultivate these. We aren't promising that we're always going to do them, but we want to cultivate them. Then you're going to move on into the actual development, which will get more specific. What are the words we want to use? And that can take place through a lot of brainstorming, but you usually need a trusted group of people who will take all the different workings and wordsmith them in a way that reflects no individual point of view, but tries to capture the spirit and the intention of all the views that have been expressed. It gets reworked. It gets practiced by living into it. It gets reworked again. Sometimes I talk about covenants as being additive. You can always add more as you discover some new area that that becomes obvious needing to be practiced that wasn't thought about in the beginning. The ownership of the covenant is basic to it being a part of a democratic process, so that there's open, transparent discussion, and people are willing to say, I will endorse this. as a part of being in this community. So you want full participation by the owners. That's why a board or a committee on ministry can't develop a covenant and then present it to a congregation. There needs to be a congregational process for full ownership and endorsement. And then finally, the deepening. We don't put it in a drawer afterwards. Oh, yeah, we wrote a covenant last year, I think, about that. A process of making it a lived part of congregational life so that it has a living, dynamic process orientation that guides the community. And how does that happen? Well, it happens through practicing it, reading it together at meetings, having it show up in worship from time to time, reminding each other about how the covenant could be a guide, especially in sticky moments where people are getting tense with each other, taking the time to talk with each other about the covenant, making sure that people understand it. And then again, this idea of thinking about it as a shared spiritual practice of this is how we're going to be together. This is how we're going to walk together in our community.